38.4 kilometers. That is the length of a bridge built in the United States in 1956. 55 kilometers. That is the length of a bridge system opened in China in 2018. One was constructed nearly 7 decades ago. It is still standing, still carrying thousands, still defying the lake. The other was completed in less than a decade, combining bridges, tunnels, and artificial islands. One cost a fraction of modern megaproject budgets. The other required tens of billions of dollars, advanced marine engineering, and full national coordination. One was built to shorten a commute, the other was built to redefine a border, linking 3 major economic zones designed to reshape an entire region's future. For decades, the older bridge quietly held the title of the longest bridge over water in the world. No global campaign, no spectacle, no narrative of national ambition. The newer bridge was announced to the world before it was finished. It symbolized capability, integration, scale. Both stretch across open water. Both defy geography. Both were called engineering miracles in their own time. Yet they were never trying to achieve the same thing. One was built to solve a problem. The other was built to send a message. And that raises a deeper question. When a nation builds a bridge measured in tens of kilometers, is it connecting people, or is it revealing how it understands power, time, and control? That question does not belong to one bridge. It belongs to the systems that built them. The origins of these 2 bridges lie in very different moments of national history. They were not born from the same pressures, they did not answer the same questions, and they were never meant to play the same role. In the early 1950s, the United States was entering a period of quiet expansion. The Second World War had ended, industrial capacity was intact, consumer demand was rising. Cities were spreading outward, driven by automobiles and suburban growth. New Orleans followed that pattern. As communities north of Lake Pontchartrain expanded, daily movement became a growing problem. Ferries were slow, routes were indirect, commute times increased year after year. What emerged was not a vision of national transformation, but a practical constraint. How do thousands of people cross a wide body of water every day, reliably and affordably? That question led to the creation of the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. There was no national announcement, no ideological framing, no symbolic ambition. The bridge was conceived as a toll road, privately financed, engineered for repetition rather than complexity. Its design reflected its purpose: straight lines, identical spans, minimal variation. Every choice favored reliability over innovation. The objective was narrow and explicit: shorten commutes, reduce congestion, support suburban expansion. This was infrastructure as utility. It did not aim to redefine the region, it did not seek global attention. Its success would be measured quietly, by traffic flow, maintenance costs, and daily use. In the American system of the time, that was enough. If the bridge performed its function, it justified its existence. If it aged, it would be repaired. If it became insufficient, it would be expanded or supplemented. Longevity mattered, spectacle did not. More than half a century later, China faced a very different moment. By the early 2000s, rapid growth had reshaped the country's economic geography. Multiple urban centers had emerged along the southern coast: Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai. Each operated under different legal systems, different regulatory frameworks, different political arrangements. The challenge was no longer basic mobility, it was coordination. How do separate systems function as a single economic region? That question gave rise to the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. From its earliest planning stages, this was framed as national infrastructure, strategic infrastructure. The bridge was designed to compress distance, not only in kilometers, but in economic friction. Travel times were reduced dramatically. Border crossings were simplified. Physical connectivity became a policy instrument. Unlike Pontchartrain, HZMB was never intended to fade into the background. It was announced before completion, promoted as a milestone, positioned as evidence of administrative coordination across complexity. Where the American bridge emerged from market demand, the Chinese bridge emerged from state intent. It was built to anchor long-term regional planning, to integrate the Greater Bay Area, to demonstrate technical capacity and institutional control. Its scale reflected that ambition. Artificial islands were constructed. A subsea tunnel was added to preserve shipping lanes. Engineering difficulty was not avoided, it was embraced. Because in this context, complexity itself carried meaning. Both bridges addressed real needs, but the nature of those needs reveals the systems behind them. Lake Pontchartrain answered a question posed by commuters. HZMB answered a question posed by planners. One began with daily life and scaled outward. The other began with strategy and extended downward. Neither approach was accidental. Each reflected how infrastructure was understood, not just as construction, but as governance. And that difference would shape not only how these bridges were built, but what they would ultimately become. The methods behind these two bridges reflect two fundamentally different systems of decision-making. They shaped not only how concrete was poured and steel was placed, but how risk was distributed, how authority was exercised, and how time itself was valued. The construction of the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway followed a logic of restraint. From the beginning, the bridge was designed around repetition. Thousands of nearly identical spans, uniform support columns, minimal variation across its entire length. This was not an aesthetic decision. It was an economic one. Standardization reduced cost. It shortened construction time. It simplified long-term maintenance. Each segment could be repaired or replaced independently without disrupting the whole structure. The engineering approach relied on proven techniques rather than experimentation. There were no artificial islands, no tunnels, no complex transitions between structural systems. Lake Pontchartrain is shallow. The spans are short. The bridge accepts exposure to wind, water, and weather rather than attempting to eliminate it. Equally important was how decisions were made during construction. The project operated within a market-oriented environment. Private financing played a central role. Cost overruns carried direct financial consequences. That reality imposed discipline. Any change in design required renegotiation. Any delay affected revenue projections. Any mistake carried legal and contractual risk. There was no single authority empowered to override these constraints. As traffic increased, solutions remained incremental. A second parallel span was added. Maintenance schedules were extended. Capacity grew step by step. This incrementalism was not a limitation, it was an expression of the system. Infrastructure evolved alongside demand, not ahead of it. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge followed a fundamentally different method. From its earliest stages, the project was conceived as an integrated system. Bridge sections, an undersea tunnel, artificial islands acting as transition points. Each element depended on the others. This integration was driven by necessity. Major shipping lanes had to remain open. Air traffic paths could not be obstructed. Border control and inspection facilities needed to be centralized. The solution was complexity. Where a bridge would interrupt maritime traffic, a tunnel replaced it. Where a tunnel emerged, artificial islands were constructed. Materials were selected to withstand corrosion, seismic activity, and extreme weather. Such complexity required centralized coordination. Planning authority was consolidated at the national level. Funding came primarily from public sources. Timelines were established politically rather than organically. This allowed labor, capital, and expertise to be mobilized at scale. It also allowed design parameters to be adjusted without renegotiating ownership structures. Environmental constraints were addressed through mitigation strategies rather than avoidance. Engineering difficulty was treated as a challenge to overcome, not a boundary to respect. The contrast extended beyond engineering design. In the American case, construction was constrained by liability, by labor regulations, by contractual responsibility. Work schedules reflected safety rules and union agreements. Risk was distributed across firms, insurers, and operators. Failure would be localized. In the Chinese case, construction was constrained primarily by feasibility. If a solution was technically achievable, it could be pursued. Labor was mobilized at scale. Schedules were compressed. Responsibility was institutional rather than individual. Risk was concentrated up front rather than deferred. This difference reshaped how time was treated. Pontchartrain was built to endure, but not to impress. Its lifespan would be extended through maintenance, redundancy, and gradual adaptation. HCMB was built to achieve a long-term strategic objective within a compressed timeframe. Durability was engineered at the outset rather than adjusted later. One system allowed infrastructure to age visibly. The other attempted to future-proof it at birth. Neither approach is inherently superior. Each reflects how uncertainty is managed. In one system, risk is fragmented and delayed. In the other, it is centralized and immediate. Ultimately, method reveals philosophy. Lake Pontchartrain represents infrastructure shaped by constraint, by cost sensitivity, by gradual adaptation. HCMB represents infrastructure shaped by coordination, by centralized authority, by strategic acceleration. Both bridges crossed water, but the way they were built reveals how each society crosses uncertainty. And those choices would determine not only performance, but longevity, maintenance burden, and how these structures would be judged over time. Time is the final test of infrastructure. Not opening day ceremonies, not engineering awards, not headlines. What matters is how a structure behaves after the attention fades. For the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, the consequences were gradual and understated. There was no moment when the bridge transformed the region overnight, no sudden economic reordering. Instead, its impact accumulated quietly. Commute times shortened, suburban development expanded, daily movement became predictable. Over decades, the bridge became part of the background. It aged in public view, wear accumulated, maintenance cycles lengthened, repairs became routine rather than exceptional. But the structure endured. Its simplicity proved resilient. Its repetitive design made repairs manageable. When capacity became insufficient, a second parallel span was added rather than replacing the original. The bridge never needed to justify its existence again. It simply continued to function. In this sense, Pontchartrain fulfilled its original purpose exactly as intended. It did not redefine the region, but it supported it. Its success was measured not by growth curves or strategic influence, but by reliability. The consequences for the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge unfolded very differently. From the moment it opened, the bridge carried expectations far beyond traffic volume. It was meant to accelerate regional integration, to reduce economic friction, to bind 3 jurisdictions into a single operational space. In its early years, reality moved more slowly than ambition. Traffic volumes were lower than projected, cross-border procedures remained complex, economic convergence took time. The bridge did not fail, but it did not immediately transform behavior. Over time, its role began to shift. Rather than serving primarily as a commuter route, HCMB functioned as strategic capacity. It offered redundancy, flexibility, an option for future growth. Its value was not always visible in daily use. It lay in preparedness, in the ability to absorb shocks, to reroute flows, to support long-term planning beyond current demand. This created a different kind of consequence. Maintenance requirements were high, operating costs were substantial, complex systems demanded constant oversight. The bridge required continued policy support to realize its intended impact. The contrast reveals a deeper truth. Pontchartrain aged alongside its environment. It adapted incrementally. Its limitations were accepted as part of its character. HCMB was designed to shape its environment, to pull behavior toward a planned future. Its limitations required active management. One bridge became invisible through familiarity, the other remained visible through significance. Neither outcome is accidental. They reflect different assumptions about time. In the American case, infrastructure is allowed to prove itself slowly. In the Chinese case, infrastructure is expected to justify itself strategically. One system tolerates inefficiency in exchange for flexibility, the other tolerates underuse in exchange for readiness. What these bridges became was not simply a matter of engineering. It was the product of governance, of how success is defined, of how patience is valued, of how much uncertainty a system is willing to carry. And as both structures continue to age, their true consequences are still unfolding. 2 bridges stretch across open water. Both are feats of engineering. Both overcame geography. Both required vision, capital, and coordination. Yet they do not speak the same language. The Lake Pontchartrain Causeway does not announce itself. It does not symbolize ambition. It does not promise transformation. It simply remains. Day after day, it carries traffic. Year after year, it absorbs wear. Decade after decade, it adjusts. Its strength lies not in scale, but in tolerance for aging, for imperfection, for gradual change. In this system, infrastructure earns legitimacy quietly, through use, through reliability, through time. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge speaks differently. It was designed to be seen, to be recognized as intent made physical. It compresses distance not only between cities, but between policy and execution. Its purpose extends beyond daily traffic. It signals coordination. It asserts that scale can be planned. Here, infrastructure is expected to lead, to shape behavior, to justify its cost through strategy. Time is not something to wait for, it is something to manage. Neither approach is free of risk. Incremental systems can lag behind change, centralized systems can overreach. What separates these bridges is not engineering skill, but how uncertainty is handled. One system spreads it across decades, the other concentrates it up front. One trusts use to validate purpose, the other trusts strategy to create it. These bridges do not answer which model is superior, they reveal how different societies interpret the same problem. In one case, infrastructure follows life. In the other, life is encouraged to follow infrastructure. When a nation builds a bridge measured in tens of kilometers, it is not only crossing water, it is declaring how it relates to time, how it distributes risk, how much control it believes it can exercise over the future. That meaning does not fade when the concrete hardens. It endures, quietly, in the test of time. If you want to understand how infrastructure reflects power, how nations plan for time, and how the United States and China approach the same problem differently, subscribe to the channel. This is where we compare systems, not slogans.